I never believed in ghost stories. Not the ones online, not the ones people whispered about at school, and definitely not the ones about old buildings in the middle of nowhere. But after what happened in that apartment, I stopped laughing at those stories. Because sometimes the things making noise above your head aren't rats. And sometimes they know you can hear them. Back in 2021, I moved into a cheap apartment outside of a small town in Texas. I was 19 at the time. Broke, working part-time at a gas station while taking online college classes. The apartment was all I could afford. The building itself looked ancient. Faded paint, rust stains running down the gutters, half the windows cracked. But the landlord promised me it was quiet. That should have been my first warning. The apartment had only one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that smelled faintly like mold whenever it rained. Above me was a flat roof. No attic. At least, that's what I was told. The first week was normal. Mostly. I worked late shifts and usually got home around midnight. I'd microwave frozen food, watch YouTube for an hour, then sleep. Nothing strange happened. Until the scratching started. The first time I heard it was around 2 a.m. I remember because I had just shut off my laptop. At first, it sounded small, like tree branches dragging across metal. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I sat up in bed and listened. There weren't any trees near my apartment. The sound stopped after maybe 10 seconds. I figured it was probably an animal. Maybe a raccoon. Texas had plenty of those. So I ignored it and went back to sleep. But the next night, it came back. Only this time, it sounded heavier. Scrape! Tap. Drag. Tap. I froze under my blanket. The sound moved slowly across the roof. Not running. Not scurrying. Crawling. Like something was carefully dragging itself overhead. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 2:13 a.m. Exactly. The sound stopped above my bedroom. Then everything went silent. I held my breath. And that's when I heard it. 3 slow knocks directly above me. Thump. 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 I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I told myself I was overreacting. Old building. Loose pipes. Animals. There had to be an explanation. Still, before leaving for work, I stepped outside and looked up at the roof. Nothing. No damage, no footprints, no sign anything had been up there. But I noticed something strange. The roof edge above my bedroom looked bent downward slightly, like something extremely heavy had been sitting there. I stared at it for a few seconds before leaving. That night at work, I mentioned it to my coworker Marcus. He laughed immediately.
Bro, you got roof demons.
Shut up.
I'm serious, he grinned. That old apartment complex got history. I rolled my eyes. What history? Marcus leaned against the counter.
You seriously never heard about that place? I shook my head. There used to be another building there years ago, burned down. I laughed nervously. Okay, and? They found a guy dead on the roof after the fire. I stared at him. You're lying.
Marcus shrugged. Maybe. That annoyed me more than if he'd just kept joking. The rest of my shift felt weird after that. Every little sound made me glance toward the windows. And for some reason, I kept thinking about those knocks above my bed. When I finally got home around 1:30 a.m., the parking lot was empty. The entire complex looked dead. Only one hallway light worked near the stairs. As I unlocked my apartment door, I noticed something odd. The air smelled different. Wet. Like dirt after rain. But it hadn't rained all week. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. Everything looked normal. I checked every room anyway. Closet, bathroom, kitchen. Nothing. I told myself to stop acting paranoid. Then I made ramen and sat on the couch watching random videos until my eyes got heavy. Eventually, I turned off the TV and went to bed. 2:12 a.m. I remember checking. And exactly 1 minute later, the scratching returned. Louder than before. Scrape! Scrape! Tap. Drag. Tap. It moved slowly across the roof again. Only this time, I could hear the ceiling creaking. Dust drifted down onto my blanket. I sat frozen in bed. The sound crawled directly over me. Then, stopped. Silence. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Then, something else happened. A low sound. Almost like breathing. Right above the ceiling. Long. Wet. Slow breathing. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight. The beam pointed at the ceiling. Nothing. But the breathing continued. Then came a horrible scraping noise, like fingernails dragging across concrete. And suddenly, bam! Something slammed into the roof above me so hard the entire room shook. I jumped out of bed. The breathing stopped instantly. Then complete silence. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? And say what? There's something on my roof breathing at me? I'd sound insane. Instead, I grabbed the only weapon I had, a metal baseball bat beside my closet, and slowly walked into the living room. Every light stayed off except my phone flashlight. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too still. I stood there listening. Nothing. Then, tap. I froze. Tap. It came from the kitchen window. I slowly turned toward it. The blinds were closed. But something moved behind them. Not outside. Inside the blinds. Like fingers brushing against them gently. Tap. 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 I backed away slowly. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Then, the tapping stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again. Until I heard movement above me. Fast movement. Not crawling anymore. Running. Heavy footsteps exploded across the roof. Bang, 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 bang! The ceiling shook violently. Dust poured down everywhere. It sounded massive.
Way too heavy to be a person. The footsteps sprinted from one side of the apartment to the other, then suddenly stopped, right above the living room. I stared upward, unable to move. Then came a sound I'll never forget for the rest of my life. A laugh. Not human. Low. Broken. Wet. Like someone trying to imitate human laughter without understanding how. My entire body went cold. And then, something scratched the ceiling directly above me. Slowly. Carefully. Like it knew exactly where I was standing. I ran. I didn't grab clothes, didn't grab my charger, didn't even lock the door. I sprinted across the parking lot and drove straight to Marcus's house. When he opened the door and saw my face, his smile disappeared instantly. What happened? I could barely speak. There's something in my apartment. Marcus looked confused. What do you mean, something? On the roof, I whispered. He stared at me for a long moment, then quietly asked, "Did you hear the scratching?" The way he said it made my stomach drop. You heard it too? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past me toward the dark street outside. Then he muttered something so quietly I almost missed it. It came back. I didn't sleep at all that night. And the next morning, we went back to my apartment together. At first, everything looked normal. The front door still stood open from when I ran. Nothing appeared damaged. But when we stepped inside, Marcus suddenly stopped walking. What? I whispered. He pointed upward slowly. I followed his finger toward the ceiling above the living room. And that's when I saw it. Long scratch marks. 4 deep lines carved across the ceiling paint. As if something with claws had dragged itself directly over our heads during the night. And in the center of the scratches was a wet handprint. Too large to be human.